The most dramatic evidence of the long Muslim presence in Jerusalem is the exquisite Dome of the Rock, which still stands in the middle of the old Temple Mount. The Muslims refer to the dome as the most holy sanctuary. The Dome of the Rock was built in the year 691 by Caliph Abdul al-Malik, the ninth successor to the Prophet Muhammad. His desire was to erect a building which would rival in beauty the Christian churches of Byzantine Jerusalem. Al-Malik could see the popularity of Christian holy sites in attracting pilgrims. He wished to offer a majestic holy site to Muslim pilgrims, perhaps in hopes of luring them away from the tomb of the Prophet Muhammad in Mecca. The Caliph hired Byzantine Christian architects to design the eight-sided structure. Al-Malik covered the sacred monument with tile mosaics, rubies, and semi-precious stones. The interior was also covered with radiant gold mosaics, the work of Syrian Christians. On the outer and inner walls, words from the Quran were written in elaborate calligraphy, a major Muslim contribution to the arts of the region. Even today, the outside of the dome is a paint box of colors, capped by a gold-plated aluminum dome that dominates the old city skyline. Curved pillars at the top of the monument steps are, according to Muslim tradition, scales where the souls of all mankind will be weighed on Judgment Day. This building is enormous. Its octagon base is about 180 feet in diameter. The dome is about 78 feet across, and the whole structure rises about 108 feet into the air. Perhaps realizing the religious fervor once generated by the Hebrew temples, Al-Malik took the controversial step of building his Muslim holy place directly on the Jewish temple site. He chose the cradle of all Western religion, Mount Moriah, as the home of his new holy site. Somewhere under Al-Malik's dome, no one seems to know exactly where, is the area consecrated by the Jewish people as the Holy of Holies, the very center of their religious universe. Inside the dome can be found a huge boulder that has religious significance for both the Muslim and Jewish faithful. Many Jewish faithful are sure the so-called Rock of the Foundation, or Rock of Moriah, is the exact site where 4,000 years ago Abraham is said to have prepared to sacrifice Isaac before receiving instructions from God to spare his son. Perhaps from this very stone, one of the great ideas in the history of man was born. The idea that all men have descended from only one God, one Creator. It is a belief which has transcended time, place, and generation. And it's a belief that has made Jerusalem the world's great religious center. The dome is sometimes referred to as the Mosque of Omar, which is incorrect, since it is neither a mosque nor was it built by Caliph Omar, who predated the structure. The Dome of the Rock is an ornamental shrine. The true mosque on the Temple Mount is nearby Al-Aqsa, and it is the place to pray. It is Israel's largest mosque. Jerusalem is Islam's third holiest place, behind Mecca, Muhammad's birthplace, and Medina, the location of his tomb. Al-Aqsa's silver-capped Muslim holy place serves as a prayer hall and can accommodate as many as 5,000 worshippers. The mosque has been renovated and restored a number of times over the years. Obviously, because of the location and the general explosiveness of the world around them, the dome and the mosque have long been a place where passions become easily inflamed. In 1951, a Muslim fanatic murdered Jordan's King Abdullah near the mosque. In 1969, an unstable Australian set fire to the mosque, causing heavy damage and increasing calls for a holy war against Israel. But the holy site has also been a place of peace. In 1977, former Egyptian President Anwar Sadat prayed at the mosque. Today, masses of the faithful still crowd through the quiet, sunny plazas that surround the mosque. Then, just as they came, most of these devoted followers wind their way back through the Damascus Gate, past the old city walls, and into the secular world from whence they came. One can be certain that any time, day or night, somewhere in Old Jerusalem, someone will be praying. The intensity of the religious ardor in this tiny city can sometimes be overwhelming. In the Jewish quarter, the sound of the shofar can be heard coming from the western wall. In the Muslim quarter, the daily call to prayer of the muezzin echoes from the mosque. And from the Christian and Armenian quarters, entreaties can be heard coming from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Christian prayers aren't new to Old Jerusalem. In fact, some of the most dramatic moments in the life of the creator of the Christian faith, Jesus of Nazareth, were played out on the streets of the old city. Jesus and his first converts were Jewish, with close ties to the sacred temple. The gates most closely associated with the life of Jesus and the early Christians are the New Gate and the Lion's Gate, also known as St. Stephen's Gate. The New Gate is the closest physical entrance to the Christian quarter of the city. The New Gate was the last of the current gates to be constructed and was built in 1896 by the Sultan Abdul Hamid. It is a subtle and easily overlooked entrance and offers little when compared to the magnificent Damascus Gate nearby. But to many in this century, it symbolizes the first Christian efforts to spread the teachings of Jesus, the itinerant Jewish preacher and carpenter's son. Christians throughout the world have always had a strong interest in Old Jerusalem, primarily because Jesus' ministry and death were so closely tied to the city. Christians expect Jerusalem to play a major role in the events that lead to the end of the age. Immediately south of the Christian quarter is a group of about 2,000 Armenians who live in a tightly knit community known as the Armenian Quarter. It is the smallest ethnic community in the city. The Armenians take pride in being some of the earliest of Christian converts and occupants of Jerusalem. In about 70 AD, Armenian soldiers apparently came to Israel under Titus. They were among the first to hear the Christian teachings, and they were converted in large numbers. The Armenian community in Old Jerusalem began to develop sometime in the middle of the 3rd century. So, long before Christian pilgrims began arriving from Western Europe, thousands of Armenians had already settled in the Holy Land. Over the years, the Armenians have generally been able to steer clear of the violence that frequently breaks out in Jerusalem. Perhaps it is that skill to escape violence that brought many of the last Armenian residents to the old city. Many in the Armenian community follow their own religion, which is referred to as the Gregorian faith. It differs from Orthodox Christianity in that it rejected the official doctrine upheld by the Council of Chalcedon that the incarnate Christ had two natures, divine and human. Such a doctrine, the Armenians claimed, divided Christ into two persons. The holiest place to Armenians is Mount Ararat, the sacred mountain where Noah's Ark came to rest. The symbol of Ararat is represented by the distinctive pointed hats worn by Armenian priests. For hundreds of years, Christians were barred from sounding bells across the Holy Land. They were considered a distraction and interference with Muslim prayer calls, and an unpleasant memory of the Crusader era. When bells arrived at the port of Jaffa, Arab workmen often refused to unload them from the ships. In several cases, religious pilgrims crated and hauled the bells themselves. Even today in Armenian Christian churches, wood clackers are used instead of bells to summon the faithful to prayer, a holdover from Saladin's edict 800 years ago. The strong spiritual tie that both Christians and Armenians feel toward the old city goes back into the history of the lovely Lion's Gate, or St. Stephen's Gate, near the Temple Mount.